Dear colleagues, welcome to this webinar about YPI, the Youth Promotion Initiative 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ylva Skondal. I coordinate the Youth Promotion Initiative here at the Peace Building Fund. I hope you can hear me well. Today we're looking at this webinar, and we'll be joined by colleagues from UNFPA, UNDP, as well as UNHCR. I will let colleagues introduce yourself briefly. Pauline.
Hi, Ylva.
Hi, would you like to say hi?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Pauline. I'm working with the UNDP regional office in Addis Ababa for Africa as a youth advisor. Happy to join you.
Thank you so much. And then we also have Emla with us today. Thank you so much for joining, Emla.
Hi, thank you. My name is Emla. I'm a human rights officer in the Civic Space Unit at OHC et al. Based in Geneva. Really happy to join today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining. And Joao from UNFPA will be here shortly as well. Okay, great. With that, let's get started. So next slide, please. Great. So just a little bit of an overview of what we will cover today. So first, a little bit on YPI as a whole, so eligibility criteria and so on. After that, we'll move into the themes of YPI this year, so the two themes. And then we'll follow to talk more about a little bit about good practices and lessons learned and share resources, and then there'll be a Q&A. And please note that indeed all the slides will be shared after the webinar. Next, please. Great. So a little bit about YPI to start with. So in 2016, the UN Peacebuilding Fund, PBF, launched the YPI to allocate peacebuilding projects promoting youth inclusion and participation. Since then, YPI supports the Security Council Resolution 2250 and the related resolutions. YPI has since invested 128 million in 29 countries. In 97 projects across 30 countries so far, and of which 23 million was invested during last year. So just to give a brief overview. Next, please. Yes. So having a quick look at the eligibility criteria for YPI, the call for proposal contains a detailed list of review criteria and the timeline and extra information and so on, and that's available here on the link here, and I'll also share it in the chat. The call is open for 3 types of proposals. So the first is joint UN proposals. The second is joint UN CSO proposals. And the third is CSO proposals. And both are required to be gender as well as age sensitive. Looking at another important aspect is that the projects need to be have a gender marker 3 or 2, and that at least 40% of the requested budget is to be allocated to national or local civil society organizations as implementing partners, and in particular youth-led organizations. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And then just to note the main timeline, the concept notes are due by Friday, June 9th. So that's coming up in a few weeks. And here are the eligible countries in 2023. Next, please. Okay, so who can apply? Indeed, so as I said, there are 3 types of proposals. If we start by looking at UN proposals, So for UN submissions, there's a maximum of 2 proposals per initiative per UNCT, meaning 2 YPI and 2 GPI. And all UNCT as well as UNCSO submissions must be endorsed by the RC. So in terms of joint UN proposals, the grants are available between 800,000 and 2 million, and it can include 2 to 3 UN partners. In terms of joint UN-CSO proposals, the grants are the same, and there's a max of 2 UN partners and 1 CSO partners as direct fund recipients per project. And the CSO partner would need to meet the eligibility criteria. A little bit more on that in a second. Next. So looking at the CSO submissions, so who can apply as a CSO? There's a maximum of 2 proposals per initiative per organization globally. So 2 YPI and 2 GPI. The grants here are a little bit different, so it ranges between 300,000 and 2 million. And there's a max of 1 CSO as a direct fund recipient per project, and it needs to meet the CSO eligibility criteria. Indeed, of course, we welcome a lot of implementing partners and so on, but it needs to be 1 CSO as a direct fund recipient. Concept notes are to be submitted by the CSO independently, while noting that in the final approval stage of full project proposals, RC or the alike and government approval are required. So just to note that as well. All CSO applicants are recommended to reach out to the PBF secretariats or focal points in the project country. That's really recommended in order to collaborate and prepare the preparations for the concept notes. Thank you so much. Next. Yes, so looking a little bit closer also at the CSO eligibility criteria. So firstly, one criteria is that the organization needs to be formally registered in the country where the headquarters is located, as well as the project country. Secondly, another eligibility criteria is that the organization needs to receive a low risk score in a hacked assessment, in a hacked microassessment. And more information can be found on this on the link as well. So this is a standardized microassessment, and if such an assessment already has been carried out by the organization, then low risk scores from January 2022 and onwards will be accepted. If that has not already gone through or has been carried through, then PBF will commission microassessments for proposals that have advanced to the second stage, so in the project development stage after the concept notes. And thirdly, another requirement is a UN reference or donor reference. And also just to note that in the later stage, CSOs will also be reviewed regarding prevention and sexual exploitation and abuse. So to note that as well. Next. Great, thank you. So a few notes about the gender markers. As you may know, PBF has a gender marker, several gender markers. So in terms of YPI and GPI, what we're looking for are gender marker 2 or gender marker 3. And what does that mean? So looking at gender marker 2, the goal is to advance gender equality. So in these kinds of projects, advancing gender equality is the significant objective, but not the principal reason to undertake this project. That can be summarized. In that way. So in other words, a gender marker 2 project is a strongly gender mainstream project, and that also has budgetary implications, as we can see here. And then we can compare that to gender marker 3. In those types of projects, it's the principal purpose of the project is to advance gender equality and women's empowerment in the context of peace building. And thereby, gender equality is fundamental to the project design and expected results. So building on that, and there's more information in the PBF gender marker guidance, but just to note that for YPI projects, gender marker 2 or gender marker 3, of course, gender marker 3 is preferable, but gender marker 2 or 3 is acceptable for YPI. Next, please. Okay, great. So having a quick look at lessons learned. So the main reasons for why concept notes have not been selected in the past, so last year and in previous years, usually come down to these couple of points that I will mention. Firstly, it's regarding link to peace building. Successful proposals were able to clearly articulate the link between the proposed interventions and the intended peace building outcome. That's really a very strong point and very important from our side, since we're the peace building fund. And another point that we have found very important over the years is, of course, gender and youth responsiveness. So successful concept notes place this at the center of their proposal. So that's another lessons learned we've collected over the years. And also regarding innovation. So successful concept notes articulated how and why the proposals were innovative. And of course, that can show in many different ways. It can be regarding what types of partners, the localities, or different types of aspects, but like there's been some kind of innovation among those. And yes, as mentioned previously also, all applicants that are interested in applying are advised to reach out to the PBF Secretariat and focal points in the project countries. And after the presentations are done, we'll share all the slides, and we'll also share the list with colleagues working at the secretariats and focal points. Great, next. Thank you so much. Let's see if. Great, thank you, Zhao. Let's see if I can make you. Oh yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eva. And sorry, everyone, I'm joining a little bit late. I'm currently in Bosnia in a PBF training, actually. But my name is Jerome Scarpellini. I'm joining from UNFPA headquarters, where I'm responsible for the Youth, Peace and Security agenda. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining today. Just in the context of the YPI call, we wanted to give a little bit of to deep dive into what exactly it means to have a proposal that is YPS responsive. So if you can have the next slide, please. The most important thing is that, there are two key elements that we really need to balance here. The first one is the youth sensitivity, is really the content of the project. We really need to understand what are the specific realities, the specific needs, aspirations of young people, and really try to incorporate those needs, those aspirations throughout the entire project cycle. The second aspect is the inclusion. It's the participation of young people in helping to shape the proposal. So if the first one is about the content, the second one is about the process. The proposal should really include young people, recognize their right to participation, but include them throughout every single step of the project cycle, including helping to shape the proposal, help to design the results framework, and so on. When you combine inclusive process and a sensitive content, a youth-sensitive content, that's when you're going to achieve the best results, and that's what we would consider a youth-responsive proposal. Next slide, please. Some of the key aspects, as I mentioned, is really looking into the context, the process, and the content. Here we have some guiding questions that can help you to understand what exactly are we talking about. But on the context, it's really understanding exactly what are we talking about in that particular situation, understanding, for instance, what is the social, the political, and economic situation of young people, really painting the picture of what is the context this project is going to happen, how young people may experience life differently than other stakeholders in the community, understand if there are any specific challenges or any barriers that may prevent young people from participating more meaningfully in society or in decision making. Understand also the other side, what are the business opportunities? Are there already any sort of positive contributions of young people? All of this should be included in the analysis. When it comes to the context, it's very important that a YPS proposal has to be grounded in the local context with very specific youth and gender sensitive conflict analysis. Really, that's what grounds everything that you're trying to do. On the process side, that's again really trying to understand the mechanisms of participation. And then a couple of questions to help you guide your team in this phase of understanding is really, what are the opportunities for engaging young people and youth-led organizations in the process? Can they play a role as implementing partners? If not, what are other roles that they can play? Something you should ask yourself is what kind of support, operational capacity, resources, and so on, that you need to provide in order to enable their meaningful participation. For instance, we know that the proposals can be submitted in English, French, and Spanish. Perhaps the young people don't have necessarily language skills. Is that something you need to do to make sure that they fully understand the process and they can meaningfully contribute? Also, how can you make sure that in the process of including young people, you're not leaving anyone behind, even if unintentionally, if you're not leaving most marginalized communities or hard to reach, or any particular group or ethnical group, any gender identity that may not have the same access to shaping this proposal? All of this is about being intentional and really try to proactively plan to provide a meaningful inclusion of young people. So in summary, and also one aspect related to doing no harm, are there any risks for bringing young people into this process? Are we going to expose them to any sort of threat, any sort of retaliation? And what are the mechanisms we need to put in place to make sure that they can safely engage with us in this process? To be very clear, in order to have a good YPS program, it's always important to include young people in the initiation phase, in the planning phase, as well as implementation and evaluation. Last but not least, I just want to briefly talk about the content. So really, what exactly are we going to do? Whenever we are trying to shape our results framework and understand what is our theory of change, we need to understand what kinds of role young people will play in this process. Are they simply beneficiaries, or can they play any other roles throughout this initiative? How do we ensure that young people will also benefit from the peace building outcomes? Of course, young people don't live in isolation. A peace building project have a larger impact, but what is specifically going to benefit young people within this bigger picture? A conversation you need to have with your teams is if you need to have any sort of youth-specific activity in order to reach your goal, or if you're going to be more effective by integrating youth into already established mechanisms. So really the mainstreaming. There is no right or wrong answer here. It's really going to depend on your context and your reality. You also have to understand if the most integrated approach, where you bring in people with others, may have more lasting contributions. To summarize this, it's really that YPS programs, they not necessarily need to only tackle or only benefit young people. Again, young people don't live in isolation. They don't need to be exclusive, the only target group. However, we need to be very mindful that the peace building outcomes also benefit young people. Can I have the last slide, please? And this is just to conclude that whenever we are developing the proposal, it's always very useful that we have the different lens approach, that we apply the youth lens, so we can understand that, ideally, we would use young people, we would partner with young people at least as collaborators. Ideally, we would enable them to engage as leaders, as youth initiators. But of course, the bare minimum is that they should benefit from our project. And here in the bottom, that is one of the resources that we highly encourage you to have a look, is the Youth Peace and Security Programming Handbook that is available in all the official languages of the application process. But there you provide really concrete guidance on how you bring those youth perspectives into the program design. Also has a series of checklists and questions to help you guide throughout the process. I think that's my last slide, right, Ilva?
Correct. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joao, and handing over to Pauline. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks, Silva. And hi again, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. So now I will cover briefly the first theme of the year of the YPI. So as Eva mentioned before, we have two key themes. And the first one is entitled Fostering Youth Inclusive Political Processes and Promoting the Political Participation of Diverse Young People. So, and it relates a lot to the YPS agenda that Joao just covered. So I think it's a good transition. So let's move to the next slide, please. So first of all, why do we think that this theme is a strategic priority for all of us? First of all, because we know the key challenges that young people are facing with regard to their political participation and political inclusion. So here is a list, not exhaustive, but it's a list of key challenges that we are aware of. Youth exclusion is still embedded in legislative and policy framework, into social norms as well, behaviors and practices. We know that there is a need to improve political participation beyond just numbers and quotas and representation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. We are aware of the financial barriers to political participation for young people, institutional barriers and structural barriers as well. Youth distrust in governance institutions and closed, limited civic space for young people, which relates actually to the second theme as well, which we will cover afterwards. Additional barriers are also related to conflict-affected situations, conflict-affected countries, and also the lack of data collection. We'll talk about that also a bit later, I think, but the lack of data collection mechanisms or capacities for young people on their own political participation. That being said, we know that young people's participation in political and public affairs is a right. It's also an essential means to address the needs of young people and their communities. It's a way to strengthen democratic governance and ensure inclusive political processes. And of course, it's a necessity to achieve the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda that Joao just covered, and inclusive peace-building processes where no youth is left behind. Next, please. So here I will go briefly through key highlights and key documents, resources that we encourage you to consult and to use when developing your proposals, specifically on this theme. But in general, I think all those resources are relevant for either theme of the YPI call. So on youth, peace and security, we have a series of Security Council resolutions that you should know about if it's not already the case. The first one is also the most famous. It's UN Security Council Resolution 2250, adopted in 2015, that included participation as one key pillar of the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, and the same resolution urged member states to consider ways to increase inclusive representation of youth in decision-making at all levels, in local, national, regional and international institutions, and mechanisms for the prevention and resolution of conflict. We also have the Missing Piece Progress Study, dated 2018, which acknowledged youth as essential partners who are already meaningfully driving social and political change. So not only beneficiaries, but also agents of peace and agents of change. And the same study also highlighted the following: the need to invest in the capacity, agency, and leadership for young peace builders, the need to address the structural barriers limiting the meaningful inclusion of young people and ensure an enabling environment for their participation. And lastly, also the need to partner with youth-led and youth-focused organizations as equal and essential partners for peace. So I think it also picks up on what Joao shared before, that there are different dimensions of working with young people. And one of them is indeed to not only consider young people as beneficiaries of our project, but also as direct partners of the proposals of the projects. And then we have the following two UN Security Council resolutions, also on youth, peace and security, 2419 adopted in 2018, and then 2535 adopted in 2020, that further emphasized the civic and political spaces in which young people operate. Next, please. We also have two key Secretary General's reports on youth, peace and security that we believe are also relevant to youth political inclusion, and that can be good references when developing your proposals. The first one is dated 2020, and it stated that we acknowledge that core challenges remain, including structural barriers limiting the participation of young people and their capacity to influence decision-making, also violations of their human rights, insufficient investment in facilitating their inclusion and empowerment. And while we recognize, of course, the meaningful role of young people in the consolidation of peace and security, although it's still a challenge. And they also recognize the needs to multiply efforts in creating enabling environment for young people's participation in decision-making processes. And the last Secretary General's report is dated 2022, also recognized key challenges persist with regard to meaningful participation of young people in decision-making. And it also included few recommendations for improvement moving forward to actually improve youth political participation and youth inclusion. So it can also be a good reference. Next, please. And I think that's the last slide at least on the resources, and then we will move on to the programmatic entry points. But that's also one resource that you are encouraged to use, the Secretary General's Call to Action for Human Rights from 2020. And also the Common Agenda dated 2021. So both resources are available online and can be consulted. For example, the Common Agenda acknowledge the need to better listen to and work with young people. So this is really the approach. I think it's quite cross-cutting under the YPI call. It's to really work with young people and not only for young people. So really consider them as partner, as agents, positive agents of change throughout the project proposals, and not only as beneficiaries. And in particular, within the Common Agenda, there is the Youth in Politics Index that could be used to also track the opening of the political space around the world, which is clearly a demand from the young generation. Next, please. Okay, so now we move on to a few programming entry points. So again, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just a few ideas of things that we would like to encourage you to consider, of course, depending on the context of your country, and depending, of course, on the recommendations that you might also collect from the young people, because as we heard before, you are encouraged to involve young people in the development process of the proposal, to consult them, and to hear their needs and aspirations when developing the projects. But here are a few ideas. So the first one is really about supporting efforts to expand the civic space and promote political participation for young people, so young women and men. We also have the suggestion to enhance youth political participation in formal processes through electoral processes, and we know that there are quite a number of countries that might be affected by electoral processes quite soon. So it might be an entry point Also political transition processes. I know that there are a few cases as well. The youth representation in parliament. So this is another way of ensuring youth participation in formal structures, parliaments, or youth councils. Another entry point could be to facilitate, to support young people's access to elected positions by supporting the alignment of the age of eligibility to run for office with the voting age, and by supporting also youth parliament simulations and youth leadership programs. We talked about the elections, but another way to also involve young people and engage meaningfully with young people in electoral processes is through electoral observation. The promotion of intergenerational dialogues on matters of youth peace and security is also another way, because the youth peace and security agenda, of course, includes youth participation as one key element, as we said before. Also consider supporting the adoption of youth quotas and other special measures. Support youth mainstreaming and special efforts for the marginalized youth as well, to be supported for their political participation. Address discriminatory legislation or social behaviors, attitudes, and lastly, support youth leadership in preventing violence. So again, it refers to electoral processes, prevention of electoral violence. Next. So this is a continuation of key programming entry points that we are suggesting to consider. So the support to political party strengthening and inclusiveness. So inclusiveness of young people is also one element. The promotion of peer-to-peer learning. And is it because I'm too long? That's moving too fast. I will try to go faster. The promotion of peer-to-peer learning and networking opportunities for young people. So again, the youth peace and security agenda, one element could be to also support and accompany authorities and governments, member states, in the development of national action plans and roadmaps or policies on youth peace and security that specifically prioritize youth political participation. I can just pick up on one or two other ones, but I'm sure the presentations will be shared. So if you want to review that list, you can do so later. But we have also, of course, the promotion of youth participation in reconciliation or mediation processes. That's also one element. And we talked briefly about data collection, which we believe is also a key point, a key entry point. The support to further research or data collection mechanisms where young people could be directly involved and engaged is also one possible entry point. Next. Okay, so this is our favorite slide. The theories of change. So, of course, your proposal will include a theory of change. This is not, the slide is not an instruction on how to formulate your theory of change. It's just an example of dimensions to consider when developing your theory of change on this specific theme, political participation for young people. So very briefly, we recommend to refer to the what we commonly call the 4 R's, which are on the screen here: redistribution, recognition, reconciliation, and representation. So those 4 R's are actually 4 key dimensions in peace building processes, which we consider relevant when developing your proposal on youth participation. Because when you develop your theory of change on political inclusion, you will have the assumption that the assumption will be that a greater engagement of young people into decision-making processes, decision-making structures will have positive effects on perceptions and on peace building in general. So here on the 4 sides of the screen, you have more details on the expected effects on the 4 key dimensions, 4 R's. But again, this is an extract of the UN Handbook on Youth, Peace and Security, so which Joao shared before, and I'm sure it can be shared also in the chat box. So for more details, more examples as well, you can consult this great resource. Next. So those are, I will not go through each of them in the interest of time, but because it will be shared and you will be able to even click on those links to consult past proposals that have been successful in the past and that can relate to political participation of young people. So here you just have a few examples from different countries that can also relate to your specific context. Next. And it's again a continuation of examples in other parts of the world. So I think we can move to the next slide. Okay, so thank you. So in terms of key considerations, again, when developing your proposal, here are just a few reminders, I would say, also based on some pitfalls that we might have noticed in the past when reviewing the proposals we have received. And so those are key considerations that we would like to remind. First of all, inclusion or participation is not about competition, meaning that the promotion of the political participation of young people is not meant to happen at the expense of others. So this is not about competition. Young people themselves should not be considered as one block or as one homogeneous group. And you need to consider the specific aspiration, needs, specificities within one youth group. So for example, of course, you will have differences between young people living in rural areas or urban areas, between young women or young men. And you also need to, of course, consider the diversity of young people you will work with. Third, the participation of young people in one area of politics supports a broader culture of inclusion. So what do we mean here? Youth contributions to building peace should be narrated beyond the political party, negotiation table or protest to ensure it furthers the socialization of young people as active contributors to the improvement, betterment of society. Then young people's right to participation and protection in politics should be considered and prioritized from the outset and in each stage of politics, regardless of what forms it takes. It's also key to foster youth-inclusive political processes at all levels. So not only at the national level, but also it's recommended to look at the community, the local level, that can provide indeed an entry point for promoting youth participation in matters of peace and promoting trust between people and institutions. And last but not least, it's not enough to raise awareness or to train young people, to build capacities of young people in mock institutions or programs, because as much as we know that knowledge and experience are valuable, our capacities are needed, but if you don't have an enabling environment for youth political participation, then of course young people will not be able to use their capacities, and then it can create frustrations. So there's also a need to ensure that there is an enabling environment for young people to use those capacities and those skills. Next. Yeah, I believe those will be my last 2 slides. So this is just a list. Again, I will not go through each of them, but it will be shared with you. It's a list of key references that we would like to encourage you to also consult. They are all available publicly. You will be able to click on the links to get more details. So in particular, here you have resources on, for example, on youth participation in electoral processes. You have different materials here. So that you have the Youth, Peace and Security Handbook that we mentioned already several times today. So you are of course encouraged to consult those resources when developing your proposals. And next, I believe it will be my last slide. This is again, so not necessarily resource materials, but those are platforms, websites that you can also consult. It's also available publicly, and that can be great resources as well, and relevant to the theme of political participation in decision-making processes. So I think I will stop here. I believe this was my last slide. Just checking. Yeah. Thank you very much. Back to you, Ilva. You're muted, Ilva.
Oh, sorry. Thank you so much, Pauline. Handing over to Embla. Embla, over to you.
Thank you, Ilva.
Thank you.
Again, if anyone joined late, my name is Embla. I'm a Human Rights Officer in the Civic Space Unit at OHC et based in Geneva. Thank you very much for inviting us back this year to talk on the subject of civic space and youth under the theme of safeguarding and expanding civic space for youth participation, including through local level infrastructure and peace. I'm very glad to have followed the presentation so far. I think a lot echoes what, from the Civic Space Unit's perspective, is an important cross-cutting issue, which is civic space, and a key to take into consideration when conceptualizing any project, meaning to ensure that youth are involved, that the project is tailored to their needs, starting with the participatory way of building the project, to making sure to create a safe space for youth to learn and to exercise their rights when possible. I'm super glad to hear that this has already been touched upon, but if you will help me change the slide, I want to start by looking at what civic space is. So if you push again, sorry, it has, yeah, so civic space is the environment that enable people and groups, civil society or civic space actors, to meaningfully participate both on and offline in the political, economic, social and cultural life of their societies. So in particular, civic space allows individuals and groups to contribute to policy making that affect their lives, including by access to information, engaging in dialogue, expressing dissent or disagreement, and joining together to express their views. And then an open and pluralistic civic space that guarantees freedom of expression and opinion, as well as freedom of assembly and association, is a prerequisite for making development and peace sustainable. And thank you, civil society actors, including human rights defenders, women, children, young people, who can also be human rights defenders, members of minorities and indigenous people, trade unions and journalists, need to be able to freely express themselves in full security and effect change peacefully and effectively. If you push again, please. A vibrant society requires an open, secure and safe environment free from acts of intimidation, harassment and reprisals, both offline and online. And if you push, here you see on the side, we have the 3 Ps that we think are very important, but also quite easy to remember. They are participation, to ensure equal and inclusive society participation in the work of the and access to information. For youth, this means participation in deciding their future, both on the parliament level, but also in programming, ensuring that youth are part in deciding how work is done so that it is based on what they want or need, not what someone else might think is their need. And then to promote civic space, including in national decision-making processes. For youth, this means an enabling environment about having good spaces where they can feel safe, where they can express themselves and where they can get information. And then lastly, protection, which is to protect civil society actors at risk from online and offline attacks. We will talk a little bit more about that later, but it goes to the importance of the role of international organizations in always thinking of protection when engaging with civil society actors, including youth, and ensuring that program design take protection seriously, but also because cooperation with the UN can put human rights defenders who can be youth at risk. So the 3 Ps is a great takeaway, I think, from our presentation today. And these are interdependent and mutually reinforcing elements for free and safe and enabling civic space that must be addressed with mind to create trust. If you want more information about this, we recommend that you have a look at the UN guidance note on protection and promotion of civil space. The note outlines key steps that UN entities can take individually or jointly to strengthen civic space engagement, taking into consideration the role, capacities, and programming approaches of each one. The link is included in the PowerPoint. If you will change the slides for me, please. Here on the slide, you see some of the challenges that youth face in civic space from a report by the European Youth Forum called The Shrinking Space for Civil Society and its impact on young people and their organizations. And it shows a great deal of numbers on the civic space challenges of youth. For instance, that 2 in 5 are not certain that their participation in assemblies will not result in retribution, or that 1 in 4 of organizations are not fully capable in engaging in advocacy activities for fairer retribution, or that 2 in 5 have difficulties expressing themselves for fear of retribution. If you change the slides again. Thank you. This slide summarizes some of the overall challenges that youth, as well as other civic space actors, face. Some more specific to youth and some more overarching civic space issues, such as over-digitalization, cyberbullying, online attacks or threats on social media, non-recognition as competent rights holders and discrimination, lack of empowerment of their work and limited knowledge about protection, persecution and criminalization by authorities and individuals, and lack of sensitization about youth-related vulnerabilities, needs, and risks. You will continue, please. So, recalling that it's now 75 years ago that world leaders agreed on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a catalogue of rights that belong to all human beings, born free and equal in dignity and rights. It's important to remember that this also includes young people, regardless of their age. So if you push, sorry, to say that youth rights are human rights and that young people have the same rights as other rights holders, regardless of their age. And if you continue, but also that young people are part of civil society and have a role in it. Sorry, if you push again. Yes, and that is, sorry, it's a bit sort of shrinked on the screen here, was a reference to the human rights and Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, to remind ourselves that young people are also included in the declaration as human rights defenders. Thank you. Right, and then talking a little bit more about protection. So on the one side, youth has a big and important role in protection, in self-protection. But effective protection, online and offline, requires collaborative networks that exchange experiences, tools, and contacts. And in that, a range of actors has a role to ensure it for youth, with the state as the primary duty bearer, but also the UN and other civil society actors as important stakeholders. And then practically on the right side, we've included some of what can be done to strengthen the protection of youth in exercising their rights. One is to increase literacy on digital security, keeping in mind that 1 in 3 of internet users are younger than 18, and that 71% of 15 to 24-year-olds are online, making young people the most connected age group worldwide. And to establish protection networks and firm alliances, to provide training and capacity building on protection, to strengthen mechanisms of monitoring and reporting, ensuring civic space is inclusive and non-discriminatory, and also to ensure sensitivization of the state and the public, and also to create positive narratives and political support. Thank you. I believe that is the last slide on our end.
Thank you so much, Embla, much appreciated. And we would also like to share a couple of project examples as in the previous theme as well. Next slide, please. Oh yes, and a couple of other resources. Many have already been shared with colleagues, some here in the chat and otherwise. Yes, so please know that there's more information there. And then with that, I think we're ready for the Q&A. Shaza and colleagues and I have been trying to answer questions in the chat. But if you have more questions, feel free to raise your hand and we'll be happy to answer the questions there or in the chat or in the Q&A function. So the floor is open. Dennis, I see your hand. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello, Dennis Besedic from Sarajevo office. Quick question. Will you be giving a similar presentation like this to CSOs? Over. Thank
you so much. Great question. So this is the presentation that we're giving. It's to all that registered for the webinars. So both UN partners as well as CSOs. And indeed, the recordings will be up on our website after. Hoping that helps to clarify a bit. So indeed, both UN partners and CSOs, everyone involved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Am I heard clearly?
Yes. Hi, Shaza.
Hi,
do you want to introduce yourself, perhaps?
Sorry. My name is Shaza Suleiman. I'm the gender advisor with PBSO, so I work quite closely with Yelva. I just wanted to address a question that kept coming up about innovation. And I think it's something that, yes, we definitely are looking for. It is part of the criteria. And I think it's really about how you clearly clarify what is innovative about the project. It can be a specific approach that's been tried somewhere else, but hasn't been tried in what the area you're working in. It could be working with a new group of people or involving a new group of young people. It's really about just kind of finding what it is that is making it something that's new, maybe untried or not maybe tried in the context you're working in. Or maybe it's a method or an approach of engagement that hasn't been done before. But it's really up to you to clarify what makes it innovative, and it's you and your partners who understand the context and are able to highlight that aspect. I hope this clarifies this.
Thank you so much, Shaza. Super helpful. And in addition to that, maybe it's also good to highlight the importance of the conflict analysis, and that it's peace building focused, since that is really a big part, a big important part of this. And as mentioned before, please have a look at the review criteria also listed in the call for proposal. Many thanks for this, Shaza. Are there any other questions? Anything else that colleagues or presenters would like to add? Oh, I see a question. I see a couple of questions. Great. Please go ahead.
I'm not sure if you mean me.
Oh.
I see there are two hands.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I see there
Hello.
are two hands. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Fulgence from Burundi. I have posted a question, but has not been responded. I have read in the guidance document that UN reference or donor reference attesting to satisfactory financial and programmatic management or of a grant in the last 3 years is to be provided. What does it mean exactly? What do CSO will request to any UN agency or a donor to testify that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great question. So what we're looking for there is a letter usually. There could also be other documents, but usually in letter form. So a reference attesting that. Does that help to clarify?
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Dear Pia, please go ahead. Sorry about the...
No worries, and thank you, Ilva. Just a follow-up questions to the issue about the reference letter within the last 3 years. Does it need to be specific to the country of the proposal where we want to do the activities, or is it in general for the organization? And then I actually asked a question that is a bit specific to the budget development in the Q&A, because you mentioned in the beginning that there can be only one recipient organization. And looking at the budget template, I can sort of unhide a couple of columns for additional recipient organization. But to understand your template correct, in the sheet 1 for the budget tables, we prepare the full proposal budget for the recipient organization. And then in sheet 2 by category, we divide the full budget per the specified categories, and then also per the partners to show that we have the 40% allocated as a minimum to local partners. And then a follow-up actually to the sheet 1, there is an indication of maximum 8 activities per output, and I cannot add additional lines. So is that a requirement that we develop the activity so there is a maximum of 8 activities per output, or is there a way to, I assume that's probably enough, but just to be sure so I can advise my colleagues for developing this, is there a way to add more? Thank you very much.
Great questions. Thank you so much. So if we start on the first one regarding the reference, so indeed, sorry, if I understand your question correctly, it's how it will be shared. Was that the question?
No, it was whether the reference letter needed to be specific to the country where we propose activities, or just to the organization.
Right. Thank you for reminding me. So as a first step, we're looking for reference letters from that country. But then if that's not available, it could also be a more general reference letter. It depends a bit what kind of reference letter it is. So feel free to, if you have a specific question, feel free to email the GYPI email, and I can follow up with the financial colleagues that can help us clarify specifically. But as a first step, it would be from a country reference letter, if that helps. And then great questions about the budget. For the CSO budget. So first, I would like to distinguish between the two different phases. So now we're in phase 1, so it's the concept note phase. At this stage, we're not requiring, full budgets. We're not requiring full project documents and so on. And so the question you're asking great questions. It's in one way not quite yet relevant, since right now we're only asking for concept notes, and that doesn't include budget information. But indeed, the budget questions would come in stage 2. So for the proposals that have been accepted into stage 2. And in terms of that, maybe just to quickly mention, even though it's not really this stage maybe, but you're correct, it's on our website. I just want to flag that there's 2 different budget versions available on the website, one for UN and one for CSO, and there's only one recipient entity. So hoping that helps to clarify a bit. And if not, please let me know or email.
Thank you, Ylva. Yeah, I actually do have a follow-up then, because it is still a requirement to show that we have minimum 40% for local organizations at the concept note stage. And if we don't do that in a detailed budget, is it sufficient for you to say, yes, of course we will, that we of course will allocate 40%? And then just to be clear, in the CSO budget template, it is correct that it only shows one column for recipient organizations, but I can easily unhide additional columns. It's not locked for that. So, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So great questions. So in terms of the first one, I would recommend you to have a look in the call for proposal. There are like a concept note draft, and there you can also see exactly what the questions will be asking at the first stage. And indeed, there you can see there that there are no questions or no documents regarding budget, if that makes sense. And then just to answer the other question, that yes, so from our side, the budget in the second stage, the budget would focus on the direct recipient. So hoping that helps to clarify a bit, and if not, please feel free to email, and happy to explain concretely in that case specifically.
Yes,
thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Are there other colleagues that have questions? Dasa, anything to add from you?
No, I mean, I think we've answered the questions regarding the 40% for the funds, right? I think. Yeah, I think we answered them all. Please, colleagues, let us know if we haven't or if we've missed any question.
I see a
yes,
hand.
I see one hand.
Yes, please go ahead. No, it disappeared.
Please. Yes, please, Dima. Yes, please. I don't know if you're speaking. I don't think.
Hi,
we can
sorry.
hear you. Hi.
Apologies. Just a sort of a quick question on the conflict analysis required for this YPI submission. Given the importance of context specificity in a conflict analysis, and obviously in this case, as in this case, it would pertain to youth, I was hoping you guys could talk a little bit more about the rigorousness required for this conflict analysis at, for example, the district level or the state level, given the 18-month project duration period. More information on that, I think, would be appreciated. Thanks. Over.
Great. Do you want to go, or maybe Joao? Joao, actually, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I may jump in here. No, just to say, I think the most important aspect of the analysis is that you're telling a story about the rest of the proposal. And I think the scope of, the analysis, it wouldn't make sense that you have the conflict analysis very national and then all your activities are very local. So you're going to have to find a balance between telling a compelling, coherent story through the analysis, through the theory of change, through the results framework. And so I guess I'm not going to give you an answer, but I'm going to put the question back to you is what is the focus of your project? And based on that, how can you make sure that your analysis is providing the full picture so that somebody reviewing this proposal in New York can understand the context and what are you trying to do exactly? I don't know if I answer or if colleagues want to complement.
Thank you so much, Joe. I think that's super helpful. Just to quickly add that in terms of concept note templates, those are available both in the call for proposal and also on the website. And you can scroll back into the annex, and I think it's Annex 2, where the whole concept note templates are. And for some of the questions, there are also some limits on words for that aspect as well. Great. Thank you so much, Joao, for your help.
If I can just add about the analysis is just to kind of, in addition to what he said, which is basically, yes, like it's the story that someone who might not necessarily be completely familiar with the context, it needs to find compelling, and the level of detail and the analysis, whether national or local, but also, bearing in mind that it will be the basis for everything else that comes after the analysis. And it's sometimes we've seen projects where the analysis is weak, but they seem to have very good interventions and very interesting activities, but it's that weak analysis that sort of weakens the whole proposal. So it is the bedrock of what it is you are planning to do. Thanks.
Thank you, dear Shasa. Super helpful. I see a hand. Please go ahead. Livingstone.
Excellent presentations. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I observe over the years that we often have links for best concepts or proposals. Is there a possibility to compare projects that didn't succeed and some pitfalls that will serve as guide also, in addition to the ones that are successful? Or there's already a link to that? Over.
Thank you for this. So just so if I understand your question correctly, so the links for a couple of project examples, is that what you're asking?
So the project examples and why projects didn't succeed, so we can also learn from it.
I see. So I believe we don't have anything specific or quite that specific available, but what we do have is all the information that's in the call for proposal and all the information that's available that colleagues already shared. So for example, the YPS handbook and so on. And then, of course, the links, for example, in this webinar and so on. Joao, please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's not necessarily examples, Livingstone, but some of the most common things, if it helps. In one hand, I think the successful proposals are those that can really tell, as we mentioned, a compelling story. They demonstrate what is unique. So the innovation that we talk about, it's very clear why this approach is new. They have a very strong peace building rationale. So it's not just a youth project or a gender project, but it's a youth peace building project. And they have very strong targeting. If you're going to translate that into what are the pitfalls or unsuccessful proposals, basically proposals that fail to have a strong conflict analysis, the weak analysis that either is not addressing the same issues of the project. So for instance, you would have an analysis that paints the broader picture of the conflict, but that it doesn't mention anything, for instance, about participation in politics. And then the entire project is about political participation. So that disconnect often results in projects not being successful. Often very vague targeting. So they might talk about projects that are targeting women and youth as if it's a package, as if everything is the same. So not specifying how are you targeting, which groups are you targeting, how you're going to reach them, how you decide which target groups, that also contributes for project not being funded. Projects that have weak theories of change. You might have great ideas, you might have done an incredible analysis, but you're not able to articulate how you get from the analysis to the change that you're trying to make. You don't explain how your different projects contribute to each other, how they are related. You have a compilation of outputs and outcomes, but there is no clear formulation of how they come all together under one coherent proposal. Also, often, and I think Ilva and Shaz already mentioned, having a little peace building dimension. You know, I know that often you would get proposals that might be very powerful youth participation proposal, but unless you're able to articulate how increasing youth participation contributes to peace building, or how your specific intervention will foster social cohesion and contributes to peace building, that's not the proposal that the PBF is looking for. So then again, those proposals are often not successful. Just some examples. Over.
Thank you, Joe. Super helpful. I think that summarizes a lot of different aspects. Perfect. Thank you so much. Hope that helps to clarify, colleagues. Thank you so much. With that, we only have a few minutes left. I wanted to leave some space for the presenters to, if there's anything you would like to add at this point, and to say a big thank you. So, Joao, Pauline, and Embla, if there's anything you would like to add or.
Okay, sorry, I saw Joao's hand, so I didn't know if I could speak. No, just I will be brief. Just to say thank you very much for inviting us to share this presentation today, and to wish good luck to all of you for the development of your proposals. Looking forward to reviewing many of them, I'm sure. So good luck to all of you, and I hope that was useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pauline. Embla, over to you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been great to be part of this webinar, and I'm sure that there will be many very interesting and very good proposals, and look forward to following in the future what projects you will support in the coming year.
Great, thank you so much, Embla. Joao and Shaza, anything else from your sides?
No, thank you, everyone. And again, feel free to reach out to any of us. You have our contacts with any questions, and good luck. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me it's the same. Just wish everybody good luck. I think this process is sometimes, you know, there is a lot of energy that goes into it, but it's worth it. So really also use the resource, reach out for feedback. We're very happy to support and looking forward to reading the proposals.
Indeed, and just to second that, thank you all so much for your help and for joining us today, and wishing you the best of luck. Thank you.